Hello and welcome to the Bend Like Bamboo Resilience Show. To bend like bamboo is to master change with flexibility. And on the show, I get to interview and learn from very special guests all about resilience and how to master it in our minds, in our bodies, and in our lives. And today I get to interview the wonderful Steve Carey. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Amanda.
I'm so excited to interview you today. I've known you, oh gosh, how many years has it been now?
It's a few years.
I reckon it
Let's
might be
not,
four or five.
let's keep the audience wondering.
Yes, let's do that. But please let me introduce you properly because you have an outstanding background. It blows my mind what you've done. Steve Carey is one of Australia's most experienced TV news and public affairs executives. During a career spanning 35 years, he's done everything from presenting ABC News to foreign correspondent covering the First Gulf War, chief of staff on the Sydney 2000 Olympics, supervising producer of Today, Tonight, and most recently, Director of News for 7 Melbourne, a job he held for a decade. Steve has driven ratings success at both TT and 7 News, and he's also been instrumental in developing key outcomes for editorial coverage, crisis management, program development, and in particular, future strategy for digital and online media. During his tenure at ABC, 9 Network, and 7 Network, Steve won or achieved every award for journalistic excellence. Now he's using those skills and a passion for media as a commentator, PR strategist, media trainer, and crisis manager. He's also a regular contributor and guest commentator on ABC Breakfast TV and ABC Radio Drive programs. You're a busy man.
I am listening to that. I should go to bed and rest.
I love it. You should. No, but you're here with us, and I'm so grateful that you're here with me talking about, resilience, and you've done a lot in your life. And
yeah, I guess when you get to my age, unless you're a complete flake, you do get to do stuff. And even if you have no ability, you still get to do stuff just by default. So I've been lucky. I've been very fortunate. Yeah.
You have had an outstanding career. How did you get into it?
It's a really interesting story, actually. I come from Queensland. I grew up next to the Enoggera Army Barracks.
Right.
It's about 5 k's out of CBD of Brisbane. And very interesting how I fell into journalism, because it was literally that I always had a passion for writing in English. Just love reading. And as a kid, I would consume books. And I say to my kids, if you've got a good book with you, you're never alone. You can be at an airport waiting for a flight for 5 or 6 hours, but if you immerse yourself in the book, you're in your own world. The time flies. So I always had that. But on the flip side, I was very lucky growing up next to the army barracks. It was a very physical childhood. There wasn't the internet. There weren't mobile phones. There wasn't much TV. So by default, we were always out running around doing stuff. So I became very sporty.
Yeah.
So when I finished school, I had a choice. I could have gone into being a phys ed teacher, which I really was interested in, or I could do journalism. But I didn't quite have the amount of points, can you believe it, back in the day, to do journalism. Right. I failed by about 5 points, which is crazy. Anyway, I had a very tough but very successful old uncle, Uncle Cole, Big Cole, his name was. And he was a very astute businessman. And the weekend I had to choose, I actually was given a conceded pass to get into sports teaching because of my sporting ability. I was a good swimmer and good football player. So I was confronted with this duality of, do I go be a sports teacher or do I do journalism? I couldn't decide. And my uncle, Big Cole, sent me a pen, and it had my name engraved on it, and it had a little letter inside it. And it simply read, "You can write forever." And what he was telling me was, you can be a sports teacher. Your knees are going to give out. Your arms are going to give out.
There's a ceiling to it. Yeah.
But with writing and journalism, you can do that to the day you drop. So anyway, that's how I did it. And I took the course of journalism, and I never looked back.
Well, I love that story. You've told that to me before. I love that story.
Yeah.
It's so cool. And you just never look back. And
it's that sliding door thing.
Yeah. Yeah. One decision can change your whole life. And look what you've done with that decision.
I've traveled the world. It's opened. Journalism for me has opened every single door to every facet of life that you could possibly imagine. And I've been a witness to history. I've reported on some of the biggest events in the world in a
Yeah.
historic sense, but I've also reported on the minutiae of just little people, the day-to-day people that keep you grounded. Like the woman who I first won an award for, her name was Rose Swanson. And she was an incredible woman who lived out past Gympie in Queensland, and she fostered children. And then when I met her, she'd already fostered more than 60 children.
Wow.
And what she did to her, and it lived in a ramshackle house, didn't have much money, but she had this huge love for kids. And to get by when it all proved too much, her resilience was she would do needlework. And she did the most incredible embroidery and needlework, which she won awards for that. So
Wow.
I'm lucky. I've seen presidents and I've seen, people at their best, people at their worst, and all in between. So journalism gave me that gift.
Yeah. And I love what you're doing now, where you're using all of your experience and your gift. Tell me how you started your wonderful business, Newsflash Media, which is what you're doing now.
Well, that's another interesting story, because that was actually forced on me, because I was the news director at Seven for a decade, and you never know when you need to leave. And truth is, I would have still been there belting my head against the wall, chasing ratings. I would have been there till I dropped.
Yeah.
And the people at Seven were smarter than I was. And they approached me and said, "We think you're done." And I thought about it, and I thought I could fight on. I can try and save that job. I can try and stay in that role. And the truth is, I was tired. I'd seen a lot, and 10 years at that level is a lot. So when I left Seven, and it was amicable, when I left Seven, a very, very good friend of mine, a wonderful friend of mine, Lara Carey, no relation, by the way, we just happened to share the same.
Yeah.
She was doing media training and PR. She had her own company, and she'd been at me for a few years and said, "Scary, do you want to do this?" Because my nickname is Steve Carey, Scary. So she said, "Scary, do you want to do this?" And I thought about it, and I took time off, and in the end, it was just a nice fit. It was a good thing to do. So that was about 8-9 years ago. We've been running the business, Newsflash Media. We've just started another company called Narrative. And it's been wonderful, because I get to use those skills in a media training sense that most people and executives don't understand. So you can have, it's interesting, you can have people running multi-million, billion and billion-dollar companies who are very, very good at business.
Yes.
But they're not so good at communicating and talking to a mass media. And I guess that's where we bridge the gap. And PR I do now too, which I've only been doing PR since COVID, so I'm still very much finding my way, but it's an interesting one.
How has COVID been for you?
COVID hasn't affected me too much, except I've been lucky. I'm naturally resilient. Because I've spent certain amounts of my life in either not isolation, but mental isolation. I've had a couple of broken marriages, and I hesitate to say broken. You don't get into marriage to get divorced, but I've had a couple of those things happen. So I've spent time where I've been intensely with someone and then intensely by myself.
Yes.
So COVID for me, because I come under the banner of journalism, I was able to get out and still do stuff and see people and communicate with people. I think it was far, far harder on my wife, Inika.
Yeah.
It's been much harder on her because she's been pretty much enclosed in the house.
Yes.
And it's been very hard on my kids.
Yeah.
My daughter's finishing her year 12.
Yep.
And that's been a hard thing. So
that's unfair, isn't it? Year 12 is so important.
Yeah. So for me though, COVID was an opportunity also to reach out to friends and do little things like there's this wonderful woman, Nerida McPherson, who's turned her hand to making amazing pavlovas. So we bought a couple of pavlovas and had them delivered to friends just for the sake of saying, "Hey, we're thinking of you."
That's nice.
So during COVID and lockdown, I guess you find something in yourself where you can say, what is important to me? Who are the people that are really important to me? What are the things that I value? So COVID for me was a time to reset the clock, re-identify and re-engage with those people and those things that are important to me.
Good on you. I love that. I actually totally agree. I think across the board, this is what a lot of us have had the opportunity to do, and there'll be much joy to be had, as is the polarity of earth. And that, after some deep, dark despair, the joy comes. It's the rule of the universe.
I think it's it's the simple things.
Yes.
I think up to COVID, I was very much a creature of, dare I say, excess and indulgence. And if I want to go somewhere, I'll go somewhere. Lockdown for my family and I think has made me realize that the simple joy of your toes in the water with the sand beneath your feet and the sunshine on your face and the sea air inhaling in your lungs, like these are the simple pleasures that I don't think anyone will take for granted anymore.
No, being outside, absolutely. So tell me, Steve, what does resilience mean to you?
It's really simple for me. It's resilience is the ability to keep taking blows and keep taking. I don't want to romanticize and say punishment. It's the ability to get back on your feet when you think you can't. It's the ability to say there's still some reserve within you that you didn't know you had, but you're not broken by it. So you can get back up and you can keep going and you can look at each day, I'm a great believer in make the most of every single day. Now, whether that means you have a nana nap at 2 PM, if you enjoy that nana nap and it's an hour well spent having a snooze, all power to you. And I do sometimes. But if it's a thing like getting up early, watching the sunrise, going for a walk, that resilience to me is also being there for your family and having the ability to still give counsel and support and succor to those that need it.
Yeah, being present, hey, that's important. For the family. I mean, that's what else is there really? That's everything.
Exactly. Well, it is to me. Resilience is different things to different people.
It is, I've noticed.
But to me, it's very much about the ability to get up, rise to the day and put in and do the best and be the best you can be.
Yeah, particularly in those moments where you just feel like you can't go on. That's when you discover new aspects of yourself that you never knew were there. And that's the gift. And that's how we grow, like a muscle growing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, well, Steve, I'd love it if you'd share something that you might have been through that you had to overcome in your life. That's when you, maybe a time where you noticed that within yourself where you had to grow like that.
It's hard to know when resilience starts, but I can pinpoint it exactly for me. It's as a boy, as a 9-year-old boy, sitting on a couch with my sisters and my mother screaming my father's name and learning in that moment that I had lost my father.
Big.
And that was a very, very big, powerful change in my life. Massive. Where I went from being a 9-year-old boy and the next day I was without a father. And the days and weeks after that, I became a man, which sounds ridiculous, which sounds absolutely ridiculous. But
no, it doesn't.
As a 9-year-old back in those days, I pretty much became the young little man of the house. And resilience for me was getting up each day, going to school, helping my sisters, helping my mum, trying to be the best I could be, getting a weekend job at my uncle's toy factory just for a few bucks so that there was less pressure. So I learned resilience. And after that, throughout my entire life, as I indicated, I've had a couple of marriages. I've had one career change that was foisted on me, not sought. I've seen things, particularly in theatres of war like Rwanda, where you're seeing people who are absolutely destitute. And they are dying, literally dying in front of your eyes. And you have to find the way to make sure that it doesn't crush you. And that comes from within you.
Yeah.
And it also comes from knowing that there is life beyond. And that for me was I've always been a glass half full, not glass half empty person. I think that's intrinsic because, you know, some of the things you see in life, you could be driving along the freeway and see an accident, a terrible accident. You could be, you know, any number of things, situations day to day that are terrible that have an impact on you. So it's how you rise to those challenges and understand that there are good times ahead.
And then going through that, how do you think that helped you become the amazing journalist that you are?
I've always been lucky. I've had an inquiring mind. I've always been a people person. I gravitate towards people. I
You
like
do.
people, and I
Yeah.
and I love learning about people. So I think the how it helped me was it taught me that there are many things that can happen, and it gave me a small snapshot of life and a painful experience at an early stage in life where I was able to realize that the world can be a big, scary place.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's still just the world, and people are people. So
Yes.
the more you talk to people, the more you try to relate to people, the better you understand that we're all just one person. At the end of the day, we might have our differences, we might have people that we don't like, but at the end of the day, we're just people, and we're all built the same.
We are. We are. We're connected. We
Yeah.
are connected.
Yeah.
Tell me, that would have been so hard at such a young age of age 9, losing your dad and the instant understanding of that. And as you said, the days and weeks ahead where you literally went from becoming, turning into a man, from being
Yeah.
a little boy and taking
That
care of
that
it.
day, I lost my childhood. I
Yeah.
lost my childhood ended that day. Even though you don't want to sound too melodramatic with these things, but when you say you lost your childhood, I was still a child, and I still had an enormous amount of fun. I mean,
Yeah.
I had mates, and we'd ride our push bikes through the army barracks, and we'd get into trouble, and we'd go surfing, and it was
Yeah.
a great. I lost my dad, but I still had an absolutely wonderful childhood, which sounds quite um, disparate, but you can still have, what I learned was you can still have incredible loss and pain and agony and heartbreak, but it doesn't have to break you. And if you're lucky, it won't break you. And you can
Yes.
still achieve, and you can still go forward. And I also put that down to an incredibly strong mum who was just, amazing, and is still, amazing and inspiring to me today.
That's beautiful.
Mm.
Then that would have helped enormously.
Yeah. Well, here's a story about resilience with mum. I lost a father. She lost a husband.
Mm.
She had to look after 3 little kids. I was 9. My younger sisters were 7 and 5. Mum had never really worked. Mum didn't know back in those days the accounts, any of that stuff. It had to be learnt and acquired.
Yeah.
Here's my mum all these years later. She's still going, and her leg's playing up a bit. So instead of her sitting on the couch, she said to me the other day, "So what did I do, Stephen? I got up." Imagine this in Queensland, the old Hills hoist. She got a piece of rope, tied it to the end of the Hills hoist, and she's starting to walk round and round and round because she knows that she needs to keep moving at her age.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you lose it.
Yeah.
That to me is all you need to know about my upbringing, is that that woman gave me the strength of character
Yeah.
to make sure that I was able to be the confident, outgoing, and inquisitive adult that I became.
What an exceptional woman.
Mm,
That's beautiful.
mm.
Talk me through the lowest point when you lost your dad and things got really hard. What was the hardest bit there?
Oh, the hardest bit was not blaming myself. That's the truth. The hardest bit was not blaming myself, because my dad died in a car accident, and I was the last person to see him whole and hearty. He dropped me to school because I was running late. And then on the way after dropping me to school, he was a builder, and on the way to his job site, it was raining, and 3 kids walked out on the road in front of him, and he had a choice, which was really no choice. He could hit a light pole, or he could hit the kids. Well, he hit the light pole, clearly. The light pole came down on the cabin, crushed him. He was taken to hospital. We thought he was okay, but back then, again, unbeknown to the family and the doctors, he'd had a rib, had punctured his lung, and he bled internally to death.
Okay.
So
Wow.
the lowest point, and I only realised that years later, the lowest point for me was having the ability not to blame myself. The old, and as a child, you go, if only I'd hugged him a minute longer, if only I'd been on time for school, if only I'd ridden my push bike, if only, if only, if only, if only.
And you would have carried that
I
for
carried that for years.
years.
I carried that for years, and I was a very, very, very angry young boy for a while. I was a very angry, hot-tempered young boy.
Because anger stems from sadness, and there would have been a lot of unresolved grief there. So
There
if that
was.
was your lowest point, how did you turn that around? How did you come out of that?
Well, it's like I've done throughout my entire life, and I've done it through 2 other marriages, through career change, through any of my ebbs and flows. I look within myself and I say, you can do it.
Love that.
I'm very mentally, I'm lucky that I'm quite mentally strong. So I look myself in the eye internally, and I just go, you can do it. And I get on and I do it. And, I'm one of these people, if I say I'm going to do something, I absolutely give it my best to get that done. Now, sometimes circumstances prevent you, but so long as you give it your best. And for example, at the moment, you asked about COVID. I'll give you an example of how I turned that around.
Yeah.
I got the COVID creep, and I went from being 82 kilos to 3.5 weeks ago, I was 101 kilos. And I decided at the 101 tipping point, I was drinking too much, I was eating too much, I was snacking, I wasn't exercising.
Yeah.
And I just thought, what does it matter? And then I thought, hang on, it does matter. It matters because you're not like that. You've got children that rely on you. You've got a wife who loves you.
Yeah.
And you're better than that. So I went on what I do, which is a very, a very restrictive and very, very good diet by a woman called Donna Aston.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
She is amazing. And I mean, she has given me the courage, the strength, the support, the resilience. And in 3.5 weeks, I've dropped 9 kilos. So I hopped on the scales. I was 101. I hopped on the scales today. I was 92. And I'm not going to stop now till I get back to 82. And I will do that because I want to do it. I can do it.
Yes, you can.
And I need to do it. So that's how I turned that around. When I was a kid, I was blessed that I had good people around me, and I had a teacher that took an interest in me. So the way I turned that around was, apart from saying I can do it, I turned and sport became my passion. And I ended up being quite a good footballer and a really good swimmer. And I was outdoors, and I took my love of the outdoors because my father was a lifesaver at Mermaid Beach in Queensland. So I took that love of the outdoors and sport and I turned it into something good or better.
Sounds like everything you've been through, all the change and adversity, it has made your life better. And that's what I was going to ask you next is, how is your life better having been gone through all that you have? Because
I hate to sound trite and like a birthday card or a Christmas card or one of those,
Hallmark cards.
Hallmark cards. But the way it's made my life better, it's made me appreciate life.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I think the sad truth is you're at your most creative, you're at your most dynamic sometimes when you are going through terrible trauma or pain or sadness or loss. And that gives you the kick to go forward. And then when you are in a place where you're forward, like I am now, I've got my wife and my kids, and life's good. We've moved into a new place that we'd saved up for, and
awesome.
And we did that the first week of lockdown, and we moved in during lockdown. So, but what it gives you is hardship gives you a great appreciation of life and what it has to offer, and why you should make the most of every single day. Absolutely. Now, whether that's sitting on a couch reading a book, whether that's calling your friends, whether that's getting on and being, whatever your bag is, it can make a hardship does have a way of making life better because it makes you appreciate what you have.
Totally agree. I remember when I got home the first week after living in hospital for 2 months, when I had to learn how to walk again, I was in the same house, same social circles, same everything, but everything looked different. It was the same house, same friends, but it's like I was seeing with a new set of eyes, and I couldn't have a bad day because I was just so grateful just for the little things and the simplicity of life again. And that stayed with me forever. So I feel you. I totally relate. That's so beautiful, Steve.
Yeah, it's a good feeling. And I think what I've gathered with age, I mean, it's that old thing too. You can't experience life unless you live.
Yes.
Unless you have the opportunity to live a life, it's very hard to experience it.
Well, you're going to die a few times, don't you?
Well, metaphorically speaking, you do. Now, whether that's you have your heart broken, whether that's you lose someone, whether you experience incredible mental or physical anguish,
or the ending of a
that
business,
is
or getting punched in the face, or,
whatever,
all that.
all that.
You got to die. You got to die a few times, and you got to
Hugely.
have a few rebirths to really live.
Yeah, and I do worry. I really do worry about my kids and about the whole resilience thing, because I think COVID is teaching them a tough lesson, a very tough lesson. And how they come out of that's going to be really interesting, because this cohort of year 12s, it's been a very tough year, a very, very tough. They have lost all the things that we take for granted. Year 12 formals, graduations, 18th birthday parties, catching up with friends, schoolies, all those things that we had in our childhood and took for granted, they're being denied. So this will be an interesting benchmark for the future.
I agree. I totally agree. So if there was one thing that you've learned in your incredible life, if there was just one thing, particularly, I guess, what you've spoken about, your adversity with your father dying, what's one thing that you've learned through that adversity?
There's always another day. The sun will come up, whether you get up out of bed or not. The sun is still going to come up. The wind's going to blow. The sun will be shining, and night will follow day. And what I've learned is you need to get up. You need to get up and stand up and face up, and just do your best. That's all I ever ask. I work on what's fair and reasonable, as you know. Fair and reasonable, get up and give it your best.
Well, I think how we feel about ourselves is more important than what other people think of us. And if you get up and do your best, then you're going to feel good about yourself.
Well, that's an interesting sidebar. I guess what I'd say is, you asked me that question. So that's my primary answer would be get up, face the day, do your best. But on a side level, it would also be, it's really important that you can't be all things to all people. And during each day, take time for yourself. Be kind to yourself. No matter where you are or what you're doing or what you're experiencing, try to be kind to yourself, because if you're kind to yourself, you'll be kind to others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you have any tips for anyone listening that might be going through a really hard time, is finding it difficult to put one foot in front of the other at the moment, that might help them, according to you?
Only what I would do, which is make sure you give yourself permission to grieve and permission to be unhappy. You don't have to be bouncing out the door every single day just to put on a facade for everyone. Be what you need to be. The second point I would make would be, please maintain health. Don't slide down. It's all well and good to be indulgent and have the occasional blowout and have a few drinks, but by and large, try and stay healthy. And the third thing is, if you need help, don't be afraid to reach out and let people be aware that you need help and be a bit vulnerable. And that is particularly for men.
Absolutely.
That is particularly for Australian men. I mean, my daughter said to me up until recently, she said, I've never seen you cry, Dad. And then, lately, I've been like a waterworks machine. It's like, oh, there goes a butterfly. not quite, but
I love it. That's good, though.
I think you need to have permission to be vulnerable and let people know you need help. So they're my three tips.
I love it, because people can't read our minds. We need to communicate. We need to let people know how we're feeling, and be surprised what comes back when you just
absolutely look. Open. If you bounce out every single day, suited up, shaved, all happy, yay, how's everything going? And people say, oh, I'm fine, thanks, don't worry. They will think that you're fine.
That's right.
They will. They'll just go, oh, well, he's okay or she's okay, no worries. And then they find that you're lying in bed in a malaise or something worse, and you go, why didn't that person reach out? So have the ability and the courage to reach out.
I think what we want, we need to dish it out 10 times for it to come back. And the more we connect with others, the more they're going to connect with us as well. It gives them permission to feel like they can be vulnerable too. And really, you're helping that person by being vulnerable in their presence.
Absolutely. People I've found in life, as a journalist, meeting people at the very worst times of their life, like after the Hoddle Street massacre and the first Gulf War and other places where people were in refugee camps and had nothing. it's incredible that the emotional connection when you ask someone, how are you? Is there anything I can do to help?
What can I do? What can I do to help?
What can I
Just
do to
simply
help?
that.
And then sometimes don't even ask if you can see that they're in need. I remember being in one of the biggest refugee camps in the world in about 1992 or 3, I think it was. I was in Tanzania as the refugee crisis was unfolding. And there were all these kids, they had distended bellies, they were literally sucking used corn husks, people were dropping of dysentery. What could I possibly do? Well, what I did was, which stuck with me, what I did was I had a notepad and I had some paper and I made a few paper planes. And I just threw these paper planes as these kids were sitting, and all of a sudden, these forlorn kids sparked up and the community around them sparked up and there was laughter again. And I tore up my entire notepad and I must have made about 100
Oh my
paper planes.
God, that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's like the most beautiful story ever.
Well, it was, and these poor kids were queuing up at the medicine frontier, the French medical corps, and they were frightened because they also had to have needles. So that what the paper planes did was it just lifted the mood. Now, I couldn't give them food. I didn't have enough food for everybody or anyone, but what I could do was just for that brief moment of time, give them some joy.
Joy. You know? We underestimate the power of joy. It was a moment of joy I had with my mates eating dinner, just had the simplicity of the moment. And then my toe moved for the first time that night.
Amazing.
And it taught me the power of joy. And what you just described then, making paper aeroplanes and flying them around when everybody was going through hell.
Yeah.
Sparked
that's
joy.
always stuck with me. That was one.
Yeah.
That's a memory that's always stuck.
Well, what I've learned about joy is it also sparks repair, and whether it's in the mind or body. So that's so beautiful. That would have been one of the most traumatic events I imagined you witnessed in your career. What's one of the most moving and beautiful moments you've ever seen in your career?
Oh,
there'll be so many, I know, but
that is such a hard question. One of the most beautiful and moving. There are so many. I mean, I guess it would be doing the Royal Children's Hospital. It's a cliche again, but going into Royal Children's Hospital and seeing some of those children who've overcome such anguish and hardship and being reunited with their parents for the Royal Children's Good Friday.
Wow.
Those are the sort of images that stick. They really stay. And I remember going to the Royal Women's Hospital and the first time ever seeing a very, very, very premature baby whose finger was, like the size of that, this tiny, tiny little thing. And how is that possible? How is that possible?
Wow.
Those are the sort of things that stick. And then there's other memories of, going through Soweto in South Africa.
Yeah.
In Johannesburg, a terrible, terrible place at that time. I mean, it was mayhem.
Yeah.
And seeing just some of the kids playing hoop ball with an old tire and a stick.
Yeah.
And seeing the joy that they had just as they were running around the road, so there are a lot of memories. There are a lot of powerful memories.
You must write a book, Steve. You have to write a book.
Well, I've threatened to do that many times, but I think in my career I've written my resilience challenge to myself is that I've written so many words and I continue to write so many words that by the time the end of the day comes around, I'm tired.
Yeah.
Writing and I think there are some people that take a lot of joy out of enhancing the truth. And I think if I was going to write a book, it would have to be more about the good things that happen, not the bad.
Yeah. Maybe later. Maybe it's just not time yet. Maybe later you've already have pockets of writing that you'll just pull together. But you've just got such an interesting life, and I'm so blessed to know you. And I just adore you, and I just think you are such an exceptional man. And
you're very kind, and I've been very blessed along the journey. I think one of the reasons I've come through with as intact as I have is that along the journey, I've met wonderful people like yourself.
Thank you.
who've offered different things. Because remember, I used to run the entire news division for Melbourne at 7.
Yes.
Journalists are very skeptical beings, and
Yes.
they are very, very difficult to turn. And the fact that I came to you for help with your dark arts, that still surprises me. And the fact that it worked, that's another story entirely.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Yeah, I'll never forget the first time that we met, and then I realized your background, and I was just like, just go with it, Amanda. Just be you and do you, and just explain how it works. And I'm so pleased that it did work. And you work harder. You were a pleasure to work with. You work hard, and that makes a difference too.
You're only as good as your teacher.
Oh, thank you. Well, do give my love to Inika as well. And thank you for coming on the show. And everybody, if you want to check out Steve's amazing business, you can go to newsflashmedia.com.au. All of Steve's links will be in the show notes. And please do leave a review or subscribe on the blog and the podcast. And remember, no matter what you are going through, you can overcome it and discover what you were made of. Steve, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.